So welcome to the Baal Shem of Kollel in Sfas, Israel, the holy city where all the great light comes from. And so one of the very, it's always good to have a summary. When you can summarize everything, then you have great clarity. It says that the snake came, was Arum Mikolachais. Arum means naked. What does that mean? All animals are naked. But it means that it was the most sly from all the animals. It was and truth is very straightforward, but lies are very sophisticated because they say a lie has to be based on some kind of a truth. So you have to take a truth and then you have to corrupt it and make it look like this is the truth. So it's a whole business to create a lie. So when you get to the core of reality, then you can see very clearly what is true and what is not true. They asked the Rebbe, scientist, I think, asked the Rebbe, I think it was Velvel Green, how is it that the Rebbe knows so much science? He's so good. So he says that if you know the principles of Torah, like you kind of know how Hashem, how God works. So you can immediately see if something is true or not true. Like if somebody tells you something about somebody you know, you right away know if that thing is true or not because you know the person. So if we know this, we pretty much know everything. And that is that there's effectively only two forces and a mix of the two. And there's obviously a big range in terms of how you mix them, but that govern all behavior. And all behavior is either constructive or it's destructive. So when you look at things that are constructive, or another way of looking at it is it's either positive or it's negative. And so ironically, when we say constructive or positive, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a selfless act, but at least it's constructive. It's a positive thing. It's something that's going to be beneficial. So for example, I don't know, if somebody's eating food, it's a constructive thing. It's going to make him healthy. If he's eating unhealthy food, so it's somewhat constructive, somewhat destructive. Part of it's good, part of it's bad. If a person is being, I don't know, just mean to someone else, though, it's a destructive act. It's a bad thing. And in fact, what's interesting is because a person can be destructive towards themselves as well. So we find what's the destructive part of man? That's the ego part. We're in Parshas Kairach this week, where Kairach was destructive. Now, officially, as goes on very much today by the radical left, and in fact, all radical movements say the same thing. They're standing against injustice, right? But standing, as we said from Menachem Mendel of Kotz, that he says, what's the difference between a lover of truth and a hater of falsehood? He says the lover of truth finds truth and the hater of falsehood finds falsehood. In other words, the person that's standing against injustice is not really standing for justice. They're not really helping the poor. Like we said, Obama, definitely one of the great role models of standing against injustice, yet he himself has a half-brother that's living in a shack. That means he doesn't care about people. In fact, he was responsible for the murder of at least 500,000 people in one country, never mind what he did with the military, with the drone strikes of the CIA, responsible for the civil war in Libya, for civil war in, eventually the army took over, so they stabilized it, but the Muslim Brotherhood, the worst terrorist organization, took over Egypt. Never mind the hatred that he caused in America. Internationally, Russia would have never, took over Crimea if they didn't have the opportunity from Obama. And likewise, Trump. Likewise with Biden, when they smell weakness. So all these things that literally the guy is responsible for the murder of probably at least 500,000 people, as well as terrible terrorism from ISIS and completely cruel. And never mind the displacement they say the displacement of Syria is the largest refugee crisis since World War II. We're talking about 50 million people. So we're talking about one guy who's just So what do these people want? They want other people to feel as miserable as they feel. Ultimately, that's what they want. That's why a guy like Hitler, what did he want? If you're doing something, it's either constructive or destructive. Now, obviously, it wasn't constructive. He didn't make the world a better place. So it was actually destructive. It's very interesting because communism is a very, very, very good example of this because it seems on the outside that it's something constructive, right? Here we are. And again, it has the same lie. We're standing against injustice. We're not standing for justice, standing against injustice. The injustice is that you have these peasants, these working class people, and they are not making enough money. And the rich people are just, kind of evil. And they're just sucking the money out of the system. And so what do? They create a new system and there's zero money for everybody. And they then become the dictators. They're literally responsible for the murder of 100 million people. So again, it shows that we have within us something that people don't realize, a narcissistic ego. And the narcissistic ego can't handle when someone else has it better than me. And it's very, very, very simple. It's just that simple. And anything which is constructive is obviously constructive. It's trying to build someone or something up, including oneself. That's not a bad thing. A person is being constructive. But anything that's destructive is not trying to build, it's trying to destroy. And whenever you have a group, all this anti-Israel and anti-West, it's all destructive. And what the problem with the human mind, Einstein said that two things are infinite. The universe and human stupidity. And I have my doubts about the former. Why is human stupidity infinite? Because like the drug addict, he's not thinking about what the consequences of his actions. What do we say? Who is wise? Whoever can foresee what's going to happen if I do this. So communism is ridiculous. Why? Because if you actually implement it, what will be the result? Never mind what will take to implement. But if you're actually going to implement it, the result will be that nobody has any money, that everybody is poor, that people are now living under a dictatorship. So it's absolutely ridiculous. Like if people did implement what the left is trying to implement, basically it's suicide. That's exactly what it is. So you're talking about things that are destructive in nature, but because the person is looking at this one point, like the drug addict, he's just looking at the drugs. He's not thinking beyond the consequences of the drugs. Because if he continues this path, he's going to lose his money, he might lose his family, etc., etc. But he doesn't think. All that's going on in his head right now is the focus is drugs. So it's like a guy that's driving to a city, and he has in his mind he's going to go to the city, and in that city he's going to have fun. And meanwhile, someone says, by the way, that city has an earthquake. And he's like, no, I'm going to the city. So, or it's even worse than that. Everybody says, let's go to the city, and they ignore, and they don't even think about all the information that is there, or they block the information that says, actually, this is a really bad idea. So step number one, of course, is to be able to be open to the possibility that something is wrong, to have a thought process, and to have an openness. The mind is able to think of opposite thoughts, meaning I can say the sky is blue, but really it's green. Okay, let me discuss that for a second. Why is it green? Why do you say it? Okay, it doesn't make sense, but at least you can be open to the thought. But if you're not open, like we said, Churchill said that a radical is somebody who can't change his mind and won't change the subject. So if you can't even be open to a possibility of something else, then you got a massive problem on your hands. It means you're not thinking, you're part of a cult. And it's it's always, the herd is literally heading off the cliff. We saw this in communism, we saw this in Nazism. And in fact, what we're seeing now in the West is exactly what's happened to all empires. They get destroyed from a internal moral stupidity, basically. It's like the teenager grows up and he doesn't like his parents' rules and he throws out his parents. But meanwhile, who was creating the house? The parents. He was bringing in the money, the parents. So again, he's just thinking about his quote unquote injustice. I want to be the boss. It's not fair that you're the boss, but meanwhile now no one's the boss, and the whole thing. My cousin's a rabbi in Kauai, so he once rented out the school, and the school it had this whole philosophy about empowering the children. So eventually the children made a rebellion against the administration. They had to close the school down. So that's why, in truth, one of the most important things for a child to learn and for a human being to learn is actually authority. Is actually know there is such a thing as right and wrong. There's such a thing as you have to listen because it's the right thing to do. And the idea that God is, that's actually why the Rebbe created Sivas Shem, the army of Hashem, because he said it's the only place that there's still authority in the Western world is the army. They wanted the concept that comes to children that you're a soldier, you have to do the will of Hashem, because that kind of notion that we're not asking questions, we're telling, this is the right thing to do, you do it, this is the thing. So, in simple words, every single human being is made up of all of these elements. That's the truth. We all have a constructive part in us. In fact, our deepest part is literally God, and it wants to. It's like when God put man into the world, he said, your job is to make it better, to construct it, protect it from harm and construct it. And that's really what we want. Everybody, wants to be proud of the contribution that they have made to humanity and to those that they love. It's just that simple. But that is a constructive force. But unfortunately, we also have within us a destructive force. And the destructive force, like the story of Korach, this week's Parsha, is very interesting because it's subconscious. In other words, what happens in the story is that Korach doesn't know that he is led by a destructive force. He is going on rebellion against Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Unbelievable. The person that took the Jews out of Egypt, the person that literally saved him from slavery. So Korach is now leading a rebellion against Moshe Rabbeinu. Now Korach was a picker. He was a smart man. He was a religious man. And what was his claim? His claim was that he wanted to be a Kohen Gadol, Kulon Kadoshim. Again, it's against injustice, the same type of story. But the person that's fighting injustice doesn't realize, this happens actually in relationships a lot, person's fighting against, it's not just, it's not fair. They don't realize that the real motivation is destructiveness. It's not constructiveness. In other words, if Korach wanted to be a better person, he could have been a better person. But what he really didn't like wasn't a situation that he was upset with what happened, but he got jealous because there was a position where his cousin Yitzhar got the position and he didn't get the position. So now, effectively, he was angry. And anger is an emotion that leads us to destroy, right? So as Yaakov said to Levi, that Shimon and Levi, that in their anger, they were destructive. So, and again, once again, it was about injustice. And it truly was injustice. That's the funny thing, is often injustice is real. But yet, if our goal in life is the destruction of injustice, even let's say now, there's this whole thing about, going against racism. So the truth is that Martin Luther King wasn't against racism. He was for integration. Integration is not, it's two different things. They asked Mother Teresa, we can quote her, about coming to an anti-war rally, like an anti-war protest rally. She said, if you invite me to a peace rally, I'll come. In other words, even these radicals that are anti-war, and you're a little older than me, you remember the anti-Vietnam War and this thing. And even though it may be very true, but when your mission is against injustice, and that's what you're standing for in life, then you are the problem that you're trying to destroy. Because the solution, I remember writing this theme about 10 steps to save civilization, which, to be fair, I think had some positive effects. But be that as it may, one of the people said, you can't focus on the problem. You have to focus on the solution. And that is what Yiddishkeit is. That is what Judaism is. Judaism is the focus of the solution. Now, when we analyze life, we see it's only groups that have Judaism or are copying Judaism that are constructive in nature. Every group that is not based on what we call the Judeo-Christian values, which are really Judeo values, and you could even say the Rebbe said he doesn't understand why it's not called Judeo-Christian Islamic values, because many of the values, the positive values in Islam, such as charity, they have an idea of giving 2.5% to charity, idea of a justice system, right? People didn't have justice systems. Whoever was the king just made up the rules. So there are certain ideas that are valuable and constructive. The idea of marriage, very, very valuable and constructive idea. Now, if we follow the biblical system, and of course it gets deeper, we have Chassidus now, it goes to the essence of who we are and how to just following Hashem and going higher than the Yitzhar, dedicating our lives to Hashem. So this is the only thing that can save us, because every other path has led to destruction, because it's very easy for a group to see what's wrong and then to create a whole movement like, oh, we're against racism, but all you're really doing is you're just racist now against whites. You're putting down white people. So you're not against racism. You are the racist that you claim to be against, because racism, of course, is judging people by their skin color. And so that would be equally if you judge white people or black people, because a person, Martin Luther King said, it should not be judged by the color of the skin, but the color of their heart, meaning if they're a good or a bad person. So we have to realize that this is a very, very important lecture that we're giving, because it kind of identifies the core lie of evil. The core lie of evil is, because I am against destruction, therefore I can be destructive. That's what evil does. We find that in communism, because we are against the injustice, therefore it's okay to use injustice. And that's what we're seeing with the left, that every single means of injustice, there was a recent government report that, Obama weaponized the FBI, all these different things. So he literally, never mind using the army to murder people, but he used, these are supposed to be institutions that are independent of the president. And he's using these institutions as political pawns. And this is the classic example of, oh, I'm standing against injustice, and therefore the means justify the end. Because people that are good, the means and the end always are good. And good people are always trying to be constructive. They're seeing, who can I help? It's an act of compassion, an act of... Now, it doesn't mean once in a while a person doesn't have to go to war. Israel's the best example of this. What is Israel about? It's about creating a safe haven for Jews to live in, a government that people can prosper. Of course, there can be much better and better and better. Only with Mashiach will we truly have the ultimate leadership. But be that as it may, I love the name of the Israeli army. The Israeli army is called the Israeli Defense Force, because that's what it is. And they say if the Arabs put down their weapons, there would be no wars. If the Jews put down their weapons, God forbid, there'd be no Jews. So the story is that it really is an Israeli Defense Force. Maybe we don't put that in because we should never put in anything negative. But the point is that because Israel's army, we have no desire to take over any country, to attack anyone. Our only purpose is to defend ourselves against attack. And therefore Israel stands as really a beacon of light. And people, even Jews, don't realize that most of the goodness of a person is not in what he does, but what he doesn't do. Because destructiveness is an active force. And therefore, if a person's not actively destructive, it says if a person doesn't sin, Hashem considers it a mitzvah. So the fact that we don't actively harm someone, that's why when the convert came to Hillel, he said, what's the most important mitzvah? He said, don't be mean to people. So not being mean to people is a mitzvah, because just not doing that already is a model of behavior. We were saying this the other day, how did the political discourse get so bad? You remember that even amongst right and left, people spoke with civility. But Obama came along and he just introduced this, and that's actually, people don't know this, but the reason Trump became president was because of Obama. You know this because I've seen the video. He saw the video. It was sick what he did. He really, really publicly insulted him. It's like President of the United States gets up and he just makes publicly fun. And he has a video to humiliate somebody. I mean, this is like 2-year-old stuff. It's disgusting. And yet, because he is a narcissist and his pleasure is in shaming people, so if anyone doesn't like Trump as a president, they could thank Obama, because he was the one that caused them to do that. Because again, this kind of behavior is behavior that's based on shaming other people, and shaming other people is always wrong. And that's what the most important mitzvah. So what we don't do in life is the biggest mitzvah. Never mind what you do. The very fact that you don't shame someone else, that you don't hurt someone else, and that's why the Jewish people are great role models. In fact, America is a great role model, because America is a country that doesn't take over other people's country. It's like a live and let live country, and that changed the perception of reality, because America was like that eventually. Britain gave over its countries, and France, the whole Western world, including Russia, gave up empires, which never happened in human history, that countries willingly gave up empires. They did this because they saw a better way of living, a correct way of living. So just by being a person that doesn't do harm, and a person that, of course, tries to do good, this is enough. This is good enough. And of course, the mission in life, a famous story with my grandfather, that it was one of the safras. He needed an answer. It was an urgent thing. So he put a letter by the Rebbe, and he thought Rabbi Chanukah was in the room, and he wasn't. And eventually he realized that the Rebbe picked up the letter. He sent an apology letter to the Rebbe to say, "I'm sorry." The Rebbe said to him that, he wrote back, "Haloizu koma taras," a very powerful statement. "This is my entire purpose in life, to ufhoib, to uplift, especially matters that other people overlook." And that's really a very important thing, because of something that Rebbe is revealing to us. It means the lesson to us. Our job in life is to help others, especially the people that other people are overlooking. It's not hard. The people that other people are helping is not as important, but the people that other people are not helping, those are the most important people to help. Those are the people that need the help the most. So in conclusion, the bottom line is that there is everything in life boils down to your behavior is either constructive, which could be constructive for oneself or another, or the behavior is destructive. And how do you know if the behavior is destructive? Because this week we have Parshas Korach. Korach was a genius. He was a great man, and yet he led a rebellion against Moshe Rabbeinu, which literally had him swallowed alive. And the answer is that if your focus in life is other people's injustice, then you are the problem of life. Because the focus of life is compassion, is helping people. That's a constructive thing. If all you can think about is, let's say, how white people are racist, or how these people are bad to these people, then you've been brainwashed by people that they're like, it's literally what happens. The guy like Hitler was a destructive person who wanted to murder people, who wanted to kill. He was led by destruction, but he couldn't do it alone. So he created a movement, and they were literally his, if you want to call it zombies, to do his will. Now, he didn't care about them. I read this from a very interesting guy. Basically, he got involved in the Secret Service he was through the concentration camp. Make a long story short, so he knew a lot of languages, so they kind of hired him as a translator and an investigator. So one of the generals told him that Hitler gave orders to blow up the German food-producing factories before he killed himself. In other words, he hated the Germans as not as much, but he also he hated everybody. He hated himself and he hated everyone. These people that are destructive, like a guy like Obama, he hates himself and he hates everybody else too. But he needs idiots to do his will because he can't destroy everybody. So it comes up again, it's subconscious. Nobody consciously. And it's interesting because he publicly said that he feels bad for all the hatred, because all this hatred in America and a lot of the West, this whole thing was started by him, because America was heading in a constructive way, a way of people, again, a way of integration, not a way of now blaming whites and being racist the other way. It was the opposite. It was a constructive path, not a destructive path. And ultimately, these people, maybe not somebody as crazy as Hitler, but somebody that still has some of their whole soul, like Chavez, before he died, he regretted what he did. So they're filled with fear and anger, and that's basically what's their primary emotion. And then, unfortunately, from that primary emotion comes this need of basically hurting other people, and then they create these ideas and all these, and Hitler said it himself. He said that lucky for leaders that people don't think. So the whole thing, he knew that everything he was saying was garbage, but even the people that officially he was the leader of, he hated them too, because that's his primary emotion was fear and hate. And so we have to understand that this is ironically it's not an isolated reality. It's a reality that every single human being, it can happen to anyone, because we all have a primary reality which either we are happy or we're miserable. And if we're happy, we're going to automatically be kind, constructive, even if it's self-constructive, but basically we're going to be constructive. Now, there are many layers. You could always go higher in construction. But basically, if you're happy, you're going to be constructive. That's why, according to Kabbalah, it's so important to be happy. But the flip side is misery. And the truth is, you can't really blame people for being miserable. Many people, as I said, there's a study of this guy that studied anxiety. There are two main reasons for anxiety. One of them is circumstance, but the other is people. So a lot of people, they live in anxiety, and anxiety itself is torture from their fear of people. That's why the Germans actually were very liable to become murderers, because they are brought up with this negativity, and therefore they have this inner resentment towards people. People that go through that actually went through a stage, so I understand it. But it's called social anxiety. And then every single person a person sees it actually creates, it's like, imagine a person that, God forbid, got, I don't know, hit by a bee, stung him, and it had a bad reaction. Every time he sees a bee, gives him fear. Now imagine the bees in front of his face. It makes him crazy. So a person that's been hurt deeply from people, and they're sensitive, and they haven't developed a thick skin, so every single person they see, and it's unfortunate. I saw this terrible, this little girl, Shem, she was like 13, 12. She did this video of, she had like these slides, and she was like just showing on the slides, like whatever, her pain, and it was around bullying, and eventually she committed suicide. So it's a very real thing that's going on in the world today. Again, I think the internet makes bullying, and the truth is Facebook is a little bit guilty, because they introduced, now they don't do it anymore. Maybe they're trying to improve their act, but at the beginning, I remember getting like I knew it was false, but like these like messages, someone from whatever, they knew that I was in Johannesburg, so someone from this area, like, there thinks you're a moron. What do you say? I mean, they were like feeding on people's insecurities. It was terrible. And so these things are very, very, so that's why, I mean, if we had to flip it around, the positive of this whole thing is what? And it boils down to what Hashem tells us: love your friend as yourself. Meaning, we mustn't judge people. Even the people that hurt us, we have to try to have compassion on them. We can't judge them, because they themselves, the nature of human being is compassion, is good. It's just that they are suffering from their own fear and anger. That's become their primary reality. And ironically, everything is a mix. There's no such thing as only good and only evil, because the evil that comes to us also ultimately helps us grow, right? There's no such thing as good without evil and evil without good. It doesn't exist. And even the good person, the nice person, also has an ego. He's also liable, you know. So the point is, I just heard a story that it was the tzaddik. I don't know if the source was the greatest, but it could be true. There was a tzaddik that passed away, and he was such a big tzaddik. He was everyone ready to go to heaven. But there was, they always have to have a court case. So if anybody have any complaints? So a chicken came. You heard the story? So,
Probably.
so a chicken came. Well, the chicken's complaint that it was Erev Shabbos. The question if it was kosher or not, he didn't have a lot of time to look into it, so he said that it wasn't kosher. And it's an interesting thing because it's a true thing. A Hillel Parcher was very careful with halachos. Very, very, very careful. But when it came to animals, and he would often make it kosher when it was a question. I mean, obviously, he wouldn't go against halacha. So he said, they said, but you're so careful. So when I get to heaven, the cow's going to complain, why didn't you elevate me? And that's the whole idea of Hillel, which is we're always trying to include, always trying to bring people up. And that's basically the ultimate truth of life, which is, again, it's like, what is our primary focus? If our primary focus is constructive and is helping, then we're in the right direction. You look at the Rebbe was all about doing more, spiritual and physical kindness. It's just that simple. And that was all the tzaddikim. They all, every single one of them had the same modus operandi, more spiritual and physical kindness. And then you look at all the radical movements that are so passionate and they're so right, but they're all against injustice, and the tools that they use are unjust, and what they create is disasters in the greatest form. Because again, what psychologically happened is that they're being motivated by jealousy, and they're motivated by their ego, and that's where it's the ego. We see the craziness of the ego where people kill themselves. So you see that the ego is so destructive. I was thinking about this the other day, that like Russia's helping Iran. Now Iran wants to blow up Russia, but because they're motivated by hate or hate of the West, whatever it is, they're willing to do anything to be a nuisance to the West, even if it's going to kill themselves. That's the nature of destruction. That's the nature, because again, it's like Einstein said, that people are stupid. What does that mean? That they get this idea and they don't think about the consequence of the idea. It's like they're addicted to this emotion, whether it's addiction or whether it's anger. This emotion is taking control of them, and even though it's hurting themselves, they engage in it. And so ultimately the only solution, because evil is an active force and it's a force that's putting people down, and as soon as you engage in it, you've already given it power. You've already given it its ability, because its ability, it has no ability. Its ability is only there if we actually start, if a bully, what do they say? If you throw dirt at a dirty person or a guy, if you curse somebody that's cursing, you likewise get dirty. So the only way forward in life is to have basically faith that this world is not perfect, and we are here to try to make it better. And once you can see the world in that way, then you understand, okay, well, if there's imperfection in the world, it's not the end of the world. It was made to be imperfect. This guy that came up with game theory said, you can't complain when people are bad. People are sometimes bad, The world was made to be imperfect, and our job is to make it better. And the same thing is with ourselves. We are not perfect. Our job is to improve it. And once we have this mindset and this mentality, we're able to truly make things better. L'chaim v'levracha.